Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Robert. I'll be your host. This is Georgia O'Keeffe, Flowers and Abstractions, our latest art history program. Thanks so much for joining us. And these are a few examples of some of the fabulous and amazing Georgia O'Keeffe paintings we'll be talking about tonight that refer to flowers and abstractions. My name is Robert. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I was an art history major in college at the University of Michigan. I spent the first 2 years of my career working at the Detroit Institute of Arts. And Georgia O'Keeffe, one of my favorite artists, and my favorite color is blue. Blue is my favorite color. And we also have our good friend Patty joining us. Hi, Patty. You want to introduce yourself? And for those who may not know, what's your favorite color?
Yeah, I'm Patty from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and my favorite color is quite prominent in this presentation. It's Georgia O'Keeffe's embrace of various reds.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll be on the lookout for red and blue and purple and pink and anything else you have in mind. So thanks, Patty. Thanks for joining us. So you've been on this program once before, and we'll get started kind of officially in just a moment. Any particular things you like about Georgia O'Keeffe's Flowers and Abstractions, or any things you recommend people be on the lookout for?
Yeah, her flowers and abstractions more than, I mean, I love everything that she's done. I admire her partly because she, every genre she's tackled, she does in a very distinctive way that sticks with you. The flowers and abstractions, though, have a kind of effect where I often feel like I'm literally just sinking into the painting. I mean, it's just very embracing to me, and sometimes there's almost a sense of vertigo with some of them, depending on what I'm looking at.
Oh, okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Patty. I appreciate that, and thanks so much for joining us. Sometimes Brad joins us, but he's on vacation tonight, so he won't be able to be here. Same thing for Harry. He's also on vacation, but that's okay. You have Patty and myself, and we'll give you our undivided attention. So, George O'Keeffe, she was born way back in 1887, and she lived a long life. She passed away in 1986, and this is the second of a four-part series we're doing on Georgia O'Keeffe. The first part we just played the kind of overview for a few minutes ago. It was called Georgia O'Keeffe, the New York Years, or you could also maybe call it Georgia O'Keeffe, the Early Years. If you missed that program, there's a recording of it on our YouTube channel. I sent the link out for that in along with the Zoom information if you're watching this live. And if you're watching the recording of this, you can always go back to our YouTube channel, which is called Washington, D.C. History and Culture. Thanks to all the 1.3 million plus people that have watched our program since the beginning of COVID. Gee, has it been that long? Wow. Holy cow. So anyway, part one was George O'Keeffe, the early years or the New York years. This is part two today. We'll be talking about flowers and abstractions. And then part three, which we don't have a date yet for this, but it'll be coming soon. It's Georgia O'Keeffe, the New Mexico years. And that'll be coming shortly. And then the fourth part will be George O'Keeffe's home and studio tour. So you can be on the lookout for that. All right, a little bit about George O'Keeffe. Hold on for 1 second while I tweak something on my computer. All right, Georgia O'Keeffe. She was what's known as an American modernism pioneer. She was part of the avant-garde. We'll be talking about what that is a little bit later. So if you think about modern painting in America, George O'Keeffe, a real pioneer in that regard. She trained entirely in the United States, which, if you're not familiar with the history of a lot of artists, you might think, oh, okay, well, what's the big deal? So many artists before, during, and since Georgia O'Keeffe's lifetime, at some point in time, have gone off to their Europe and studied there, the great masters and things like that. And she never did. She stayed entirely in the US, at least for her kind of initial upbringing, so to speak, as an artist. She did later on travel throughout the world, but her training was entirely in the US, which is unusual for someone, particularly from that era. The subjects that she's most known for: flowers, abstractions, New York cityscapes, and New Mexico landscapes, but not sexuality. We'll talk about why that is a little bit later. And then her style. Georgia O'Keeffe's painting is very unique, very distinctive. And some of the reasons why she used really bold colors, as Patty was mentioning, talking about the red and other colors, and a lot of variety of colors. Sometimes when we profile artist, you can see easily what their favorite color is. Not so much for her. She really used the whole rainbow. She also used magnified shapes and simplified details and juxtaposition. So you can be on the lookout for that. She was married to photographer and modern art promoter Alfred Stieglitz, and she's one of the world's great artists, not just a great woman artist or a great American artist or anything like that, just a great artist, period. So we'll go talk why in just a moment. All right. Our first trivia question for the night. How many paintings did Georgia O'Keeffe make or create? What do you think? Did she make 10 paintings or 37 paintings or 289 paintings or 5,642 paintings? What do you think? The answer, over 2,000 paintings. She was really prolific and she lived a long life, and she was very active as an artist during her entire career. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see all 2,000 plus paintings of George O'Keeffe's, but I did pick a few highlights. And so I pulled 60 or over 60 George O'Keeffe paintings that focused on the subjects of either flowers and or abstractions. All right, here's the first one.
Would it be fair to say that she is among the artists that established a distinctly American type of painting?
Oh yeah, definitely. Just because she's such a pioneer in the genre like of modern art, and her art is just so distinctive. I mean, you think about all the artists there have been over throughout the course of history, and her artwork is just so unique. It's really amazing that she was able to kind of carve out her own niche, so to speak. But yeah, that's a great point, Patty. A real pioneer in American art, because we don't really have time to get in this particular topic. But before artists like Georgia O'Keeffe came along, Europe was where all the great artists were, you know, Monet and Van Gogh and people like that, the old masters before them. And it took artists like George O'Keeffe really to make America one of the great art, say, locations in the world. So great point, Patty. Appreciate that. All right, so we'll look at her artwork in mostly a chronological order, not completely, but a little bit. And I'll show you where these paintings are located at. Perhaps they're near your home or where you might be visiting at some point in time in the near future. You can go check them out in person. So this is at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which has a fabulous collection of her artwork. And this is called Teapot and Flowers from between 1903 and 1905. It's a still life. And wow, look at this. She painted this when she was a teenager. They think she was somewhere between 16 and 18 when she painted this. So she was in the public school system when she did this particular one. And I always like looking at these artworks of early artists, like, okay, can you kind of see the signs of things to come? So very talented in that regard. And then let's jump ahead a little bit. If you want to know more about Georgia O'Keeffe's earlier life or years or career, you can check out our previous program. But Georgia ends up meeting the photographer Alfred Stieglitz. And to many, he's not a household name per se, the way Georgia O'Keeffe is. But that being said, he was a really important and influential modern art photographer. And he also was a modern art promoter. So he had an art gallery in New York. He was hosting artworks by different modern artists, and he really sought for the community in general to embrace not only photography as an art form, but also modern art. And there's a photo of him from 1915. And he ends up meeting Georgia O'Keeffe in New York City. She was there on a trip. She ends up going back to Texas where she was living. If you didn't know that, Georgia O'Keeffe lived in Texas during 2 stints of her lifetime. But her and O'Keeffe start this correspondence, and he essentially, in so many words, tells her, like, listen, if you want to be a professional artist, you need to come to New York City. This is where all the action is taking place. And you're probably not going to be able to make it as a professional artist living in the Texas Panhandle. And so she thinks, oh, that's probably a good idea. So she moves to New York in 1918, the summer, and O'Keeffe posed for many photographs by her then friend, George O'Keeffe. Although things eventually turned into a romantic relationship, and then later on they would get married. That whole romance is a whole nother story for another day. And there's the young George O'Keeffe. And look, she's sitting in front of some plants and flowers, making her artwork. All right, so what I thought I would do is I broke up the artwork into kind of like categories. And I like to look at the art this way because while it is great to see one individual painting, sometimes you can get a little bit more appreciation or see things. And you're looking at a group of paintings together. And so, like, for instance, these are early abstractions that George O'Keeffe did. And if you look at these 7 paintings, you can see quite a few similarities, but you can also see quite a few differences. So let's go look at these. And wow, look at these fabulous colors. If you were to look at this, like, well, gee, what color is Georgia O'Keeffe's favorite? I don't know. She's using a lot of different colors. And this one is not far from where I'm at, the Amon Carter Museum of American Art in Fort Worth, Texas, which has the largest number of Georgia O'Keeffe paintings in the Lone Star State. So if you're in Texas and you like Georgia O'Keeffe, come down to the Amon Carter Museum of American Art. This is called Series 1, number 1 from 1918. It's an abstraction, of course, and it's got a lot of really great colors and shapes. And you'll frequently see this with Georgia O'Keeffe's artwork. She titles them as part of a series. So something to be on the lookout for. And then what exactly is abstract art? I feel like that's a term where most people know what it means. But like, what's the official definition? I think most people, if they see abstract art, they can point it out. But what's the official definition? It's art that does not attempt to represent external reality, but seeks to achieve its effect using shapes, forms, colors, and textures. You can see that here. And then another definition of abstract art, art that uses the visual language of shape, form, color, and line to create a composition which may exist with a degree of independence from visual references in the world. So we'll go with independence from visual reality. That's what abstract art is. And you can remember those words and use those the next time you're at a party talking about art or some similar function. So yeah, really beautiful painting with the great colors and shapes. Here's another one, also at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. It's called Blue Line from 1919. Again, focus here on colors and shapes as opposed to depicting visual reality.
And I think she uses both to.
Oh, what was that, Patty? We lost you for a second. You said, I heard you say you think she uses both. Oh, hold on. I think Patty's having a technical difficulty, but she'll be back in just one moment. All right, Patty, well, let me know when you get back on. Let us know when you get back on. Here's one at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's called Red and Orange Streak from 1919. This was actually painted in New York while she was living there, but it was a painting that she did of her memories of living in the Texas Panhandle when George O'Keeffe lived in Amarillo, Texas, if you know where that is. She was really amazed by the sky of the Western United States and also the storms that they had there and the mountains and trains would run through there. And she was really fascinated by that. So she ended up making a lot of paintings of her time there, including this one, Red and Orange Streak, 1919. And, oh, hold on for just 1 second. I have to tweak something on my computer. Patty, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Told you it
Okay,
was.
cool. It's the ghost of Alfred Stieglitz making you muted. So
Yeah.
let's see. You were I heard you say something about both and then you cut out. So I think we were looking at this painting maybe?
The one before, I think, but she uses both
Oh yeah.
color and line. to create a sense of kinesis in these paintings, I think.
Oh yeah, that is an excellent point. Thanks. I appreciate that. Someone is asking if she used oil paints or acrylics, or if she could also include watercolors. She did early on in her career do a lot of watercolor paintings. When she met Stieglitz, he essentially told her, you know what, serious artists don't use watercolors, Georgia. And so from that point on, she mostly did oil paint. And then acrylic is more of like a modern art kind of thing, like a little bit later in the art world, so to speak. But she did use a little bit different formats, but almost all these paintings are in oil. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. This is also from memories of when she lived in Texas, but it was painted in New York. So it's kind of strange. She goes to New York after living in Texas. It's almost kind of like she's homesick for the Texas panhandle landscape. She does a series of paintings, not just these two, but several others of the sky and the storms and the mountains and the trains and all that kind of stuff out there.
And that sense of kinesis is very, very different from her New York period because that is so stolid and present.
Oh, sorry. I had my screen paused. Sorry about that. Here was the painting itself. Thanks for the heads up. Here's the full view. Thank you, Carol and Sharon. Appreciate that. And this is at another great museum in New York, the Whitney Museum of American Art. Music, Pink and Blue, #2. So again, this has to do with the titles where she would do these series of paintings. And there'd be #1, #2, #3, #4, etc. Another great abstraction with colors and shapes. And this refers to art and music. You might not know this. George O'Keeffe was a big music lover, and she was really interested in kind of the relationship between the visual artists, or the visual arts, I should say, and music. And for many vanguard artists in the early 20th century, music offered a model for expressing nonverbal emotional states and sensations. Georgia O'Keeffe was fascinated with what she called, quote, the idea that music could be translated into something for the eye, end quote. But her references to music in the titles of her paintings derived equally from her belief that visual art, like music, could convey powerful emotions independent of representational subject matter. In music, Pink and Blue, #2, the fluid forms imply a connection between sight and sound, while also suggesting the rhythms and harmonies that O'Keeffe perceived in nature.
Someone's asking what I mean by kinesis, and this would be a good time to connect with what you just had up there. The sense of movement and flow, and that it's just not a static thing, and that commentary really sort of ties that up. This was also the period that a lot of the distinctive forms of American music, including country and jazz, were being developed.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, they would never really make that connection, but it is kind of amazing that these artists, whether they're visual artists or musical artists or literary artists, are all kind of working in tandem, so to speak. And there's the Fulvia. Really love the colors on this painting, really fabulous. And then again, just look at these forms. I mean, if you had never seen this painting before, and someone asked you who made it, I would think a number of people would maybe guess Georgia O'Keeffe. Just a very unique and distinctive style, which again is really incredible when you think about the number of artists there have been over the history of art, and for someone to be able to carve out their own niche, so to speak, and create something that's very unique to them, that's pretty extraordinary. Here's another great one. This is Blue and Green Music.
Christina just put into words what I was trying to figure out a way to articulate. But what did she do about? Let me find it now because I thought I was going to remember it. Hold on. Oh, her shading is so tactile. Yes.
And what is tactile? What does that elaborate for people that may not know what that means, especially since we have people joining us outside the U.S. that might not be native English speakers?
I think that's part of what makes me sometimes feel like I'm sinking in. Yeah, you can almost touch it, or you can follow it, or it's more alive than just sitting there on a canvas. Do you know what I'm
Yeah, just
saying?
yeah, just flat paint on a canvas. It's like
Yeah.
something you can touch.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then here's again that quote from Georgia O'Keeffe where she's exploring, quote, the idea that music could be translated into something for the eye. So how about that? So I don't know, I can almost picture now Georgia O'Keeffe at home and she's listening to music and she's getting ideas and then going and make paintings like this. This painting is one of my sentimental favorites because it was the cover of one of my art history books in college on modern art. So there you have
Mm.
it. Let's see. And again, really incredible with the colors and the shapes and the forms and the lines.
A sense of dance.
A sense of what, Patty?
A sense of dance.
Oh, yeah, a sense of dance, right? Exactly. Yeah. Movement and all that kind of stuff. And then this is for our friends down in Houston. The Museum of Fine Arts Houston has a great collection of Georgia O'Keeffe paintings as well. Gray lines with black, blue, and yellow from 1923. Another abstraction focusing on colors and shapes.
This one reminds me of her painting of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's an interesting connection.
Well, that cathedral sensation, the colors, almost like stained glass.
Uh huh.
Yep, Michelle's pointing out a strong sense of rhythm in her work. I think she might have been successful in what she was trying to do.
And here you have it. So again, when you look at these 7 paintings, now she does a lot of abstractions throughout her career, and we'll see some later abstractions that she did, which look a little bit different. But yeah, here you go, 7 great Georgia O'Keeffe early abstractions. And you also have to remember at this point in time, abstract art wasn't as commonplace as it is now. If you talk to just regular people, most people know what abstract art is. And not to say that she invented abstract art, but art from this period, the late teens, and then in the early 20s, abstract art really hadn't been around to this degree um, for that extended period of time. So she's really a pioneer in that regard. Any particular final thoughts, Patty, on the early abstractions?
Well, yeah, it was like way before, say, the ones that tend to be more familiar now, like Warhol and Jasper Johns and uh,
Jackson Pollock and yeah.
Jackson Pollock. Yeah. Just, I mean, she's coming out of nowhere with this, which makes it even more amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is funny because I always frequently hear people say, "Oh, I don't like modern art," which that's fine, that's fair enough. But maybe I think maybe sometimes when people say that, they might be referring to like more contemporary art, as opposed to like say art like this. Because traditionally in art terms, modern art means like anything from like I don't know the past 100 or 150 years, and usually contemporary art means like past art from like the past, say I don't know, few decades.
Yeah, Christine was just pointing out that in these abstractions, there's a very feminine aesthetic, which you wouldn't necessarily say about her New York paintings or her desert paintings.
Oh yeah, that is a great point, and which is interesting because like, why is that? I mean, I would maybe think, well, it doesn't have harsh lines, maybe, but there are a lot of lines on her artwork. But there are also a lot of curvilinear forms, and then the colors are um, just really amazing and fascinating. All right, well, let's continue on. Here's a cool painting. It's called Plums from 1920. This one's in a private collection, meaning like an individual person owns this. So, I mean, wow, imagine coming home from work and, having this on your wall of your house. That would be pretty cool. And again, it's a still life, but we're seeing the emphasis on the colors and the shapes of the plums.
And their favorite colors are seen together, Robert.
Yeah, there you go, red and blue. Patty and
Yeah,
Robert coming together for their love of the plums painting, which is ironic because I do love this.
it's such a rich. Both colors are rich, and yet the connection between them is even more rich.
Yeah, they're those are different colors, but yet they're very compatible in this painting. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that's neat about plums that they do have different colors. I mean, every
Velvet,
fruit.
I'm saying yes, velvety is another good description of her use of color.
Mhm. And then we'll be talking about a place called Lake George, New York. And if you're not familiar with the geography of New York City, I think when most people, when they hear New York, you think New York City. This is a little different of a place. This is upstate New York. So Lake George is over here. And Georgia O'Keeffe ends up spending a lot of time there because Alfred Stieglitz and his family had a summer home there. And so they would vacation up there for weeks and months on end in the summer. Georgia O'Keeffe ends up spending a lot of time there because she's in this romantic relationship and later on marriage to Alfred Stieglitz. And so she ends up making a lot of paintings in Lake George, New York, including this one, Trees in Autumn from 1920 or 1921. And more great, fabulous colors.
This is extraordinary because if you're someone who's lived in the Northeast, the Appalachian area, or New England, this is not the typical representation of autumn leaves. This is just
Mm-hmm.
something from a different world.
Yeah, that is excellent. I mean, yeah, because I mean that's one of the things that that area of the country is known for, just the beautiful fall colors, and this is a little bit different. She's giving us her own unique style and vision. Let's see, the museum, the placard for this painting at the museum says a vibrant canvas of a large orange red tree against purple white hills and a blue sky. Surrounding the main red tree are areas of yellow color on the left and a green fir tree on the right. So that's pretty cool. Now, Georgia O'Keeffe, again, we're talking tonight about flowers and abstractions. Some of her paintings of flowers are, in fact, abstractions, including these ones. And what makes these flower paintings abstractions? Well, they have very simplified forms. So they cut out a lot of the details. They're magnifications, meaning you're looking at them up close. There's also this really close cropping, which means you can't see the background or anything like that. And then, of course, also the vibrant colors. So let's look at some of these. This is at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in New Mexico. Series one, white and blue flower shapes from 1919. And you're going to see this over and over again, this idea of magnification, where you think of looking at something through a magnifying glass, as opposed to, say, looking at it from like a distance. And then because of the magnification and the close cropping and things like that, it makes these artworks, I wouldn't say they were completely abstract. Um, Now, maybe if you were seeing this for the first time, you might not know what it is. But when you look at the title and then start to consider this in the context of other works that she did, I would maybe call this semi abstract. And what did her husband, Alfred Stieglitz, think about her artwork? Well, he was a big fan of hers and a big promoter of hers. And he called this, say, vision that Georgia O'Keeffe had of her style a new natural feminine essence. And then it's funny because if you were to like walk up and ask random people on the street like what they know about George O'Keeffe, I wouldn't think it would be like the first thing that would come to people's minds, but something you hear over and over again. Oh yeah, her pictures are like of erotic stuff and things like that. And she was actually kind of put off by that. She said in a quote, "When people read erotic symbols into my paintings, they're really thinking about their own affairs." And kind of how this got started, in my opinion, was Stieglitz took nude photographs of George O'Keeffe and hung them in his art gallery, which was really shocking at the time. Nudity wasn't as commonplace as it is now. And then after that, George O'Keeffe ends up making all these flower paintings, and people, men, just like, oh, nude photographs, paintings of flowers, must be something erotic going on there. And it was funny because Stieglitz was a real marketing guy, uh, also in my opinion. And he's like, hey, you know what? If people think that, that's fine. It's gonna sell more paintings. George O'Keeffe just really thought that kind of like diminished her artwork, and that's not what she was all about. And she was got annoyed by that because that really kind of took wind and became like a thing that people are even still talking about today. So kind of funny the contrasting idea between George O'Keeffe wanting to be a purist and she's making this art and people should look at it just for art's sake. And Stevens is like, hey, if they want to read erotic stuff into it, so be it. Makes her artwork more popular and more likely to buy it. So kind of funny.
Christine is making a point that there's a difference between sensual and erotic. Erotic like narrows it down to specific areas,
Oh yeah,
whereas
no, that is a great point. Yeah,
yeah,
that is actually probably a better word to use, sensual instead of erotic.
and the sensuality comes from both the curvilinear, but also the way she shades the colors. Real again, really has that sensuality to it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, the two of you. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. This one's at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Here's Patty's favorite color, red. And again, another flower abstraction with the magnification. It does make it somewhat abstract.
If I had that painting in my house, I might never leave my house.
Wow. Well, that's impressive.
Yeah.
It is
That's
really
one
spectacular.
I'm falling into it, and I'm sure it has something to do with the red too.
Gee, Patty, I just got the idea. We should do a program of nothing but red paintings, like all the best uses of the color red throughout history. We'll have to work on that. Yeah, well, yeah. Now that I think you can do that for a lot of colors, wood,
Yeah,
purple,
almost any
green,
color.
and
Yeah.
if you
And
want to
which
do
brings us
black, you
back
could
to the
talk about
old question.
sneak some. Oh, I was just going to
Oh,
say, if you wanted to talk about black, you could sneak some Manet paintings in there.
yeah. Well, which brings us
What was
back
that you
to
were going to say, Patty? Sorry, I interrupted you.
forever. How many colors do you use to make white?
Oh, yeah, exactly. And this one's at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Here's one for our Mid Atlantic friends at the Baltimore Museum of Art, Pink Tulip from 1926. And again, the magnification, the close cropping, the limiting of the details, you can kind of see some patterns when you look at her artworks in groups like we are now.
And you also have what McEwen would have been later talking about the medium. The colors she uses changes the total response to the painting with the shapes and the presentation. Some of her colors are hot and others are would be categorized as cool.
Mm-hmm. So, if you were to like see one of these paintings in a museum hanging on the wall, kind of take it in, and but when you look at it, like, oh, okay, wow, look at these four paintings that George O'Keeffe made around the same point in time in her career, the same kind of style, and again, you can really see kind of some patterns of things that she's focusing on. All right, let's continue on. Here are some petunias. Petunia number two from 1924. This was painted at Lake George, New York. And it's another one of the several series that George O'Keeffe did. There's several others from the same time, but we'll show you this one. And this is Petunias from 1925, also from Lake George, New York. I have to give a shout out to my amazing wife, Michelle, because this is her favorite George O'Keeffe paintings, which is not surprising because purple is my wife's favorite color. And hey, if you like a particular color or you know someone that does, they have note cards of George O'Keeffe's paintings or framed prints and things like that. So you can be on the lookout for your favorite color or perhaps favorite color of someone you know. And this is at the DeYoung Museum of Art in San Francisco. And then here's the museum display. So sometimes it's really neat to see how museums get creative in their displays of their artwork. And so here's some actual flowers in front of the paintings. You can compare and contrast the real thing with George O'Keeffe's painting. So nicely done here.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to have this one in here. I just love this.
Yeah, just why don't more people do this? I guess probably the time and effort involved. And then let's zoom in and we'll look at the painting in quadrants. So here's the full view, and then we'll zoom in and look at it in quadrants. So here's the top left. And again, that magnification concept. It's funny when you zoom in the painting like this, like, oh, this actually could be a painting just like itself, just this quarter, because it looks so similar to other things that she's done. Here's the top right. And again, these wavy, curvilinear shapes. And then I also really like the great colors. I mean, yeah, this is all purple, but look at all the different shades of purple, like Patty was saying about the color. What was it you said about the color white? We've talked about that before. I don't
How
remember the
many
exact
colors
color.
we used to make white snow?
Yeah,
That always came up, I think, and but I've always remembered that because I thought that was a great way to get into this whole idea of painting versus trying to make something look real. Art in
yeah.
bloom, as Jan is saying, yes.
And then close-ups of the bottom. And there you have it. Another reason why I wanted to show this particular photo is this idea, and we'll talk more about this later because there's a one or two quotes that George O'Keeffe has about talking what she's trying to do. Look at the size of this painting. So I don't have the exact dimensions here, but flowers are essentially pretty small usually. These paintings are much bigger, so she's really expanded the size and the scope of these flowers so that we can look at them more closely detailed than we could be if we were just looking at the smaller flowers in real life. And then also too, this display does really a great job of just showing you all the different shades of purple and different colors. And she's encapsulated many of those in her painting.
That's almost part of what makes or gives me this sense of falling. It's like you're taking in the painting and yet you have to keep going deeper and deeper because the shades keep changing, and I think that may be part of that sensation is that it just keeps drawing you further in.
Yeah, I think so, Petty, because I know for myself like this, I just keep looking at it, my eyes kind of roaming around, get all these different shades of color. Oh, look at that. Oh no, look at that. Oh no, over here.
And so it gives it adds to that whole sense of dimension and movement.
Yeah, yeah, it's not as static as some still life paintings are.
You would not call this a still life.
Yeah, right. In the traditional sense, no, because it is
Okay.
very different.
The plums,
And
yes. The flowers, no.
oh, yeah, the plums. Um, so a lot of artists are struggling artists. That's kind of the when we think of artists, we tend to think of people oftentimes, struggling financially. Georgia O'Keeffe was very successful during her lifetime. She was extremely popular. She was self-sufficient. She sold a ton of paintings. So even back in 1927, she had her first museum exhibit. It was actually at the Brooklyn Museum. So for our friends in New York, Brooklyn is very proud of the fact that they were the first museum to host a Georgia O'Keeffe art exhibit. So a great distinction for them. So she's popular and successful while she's alive. And of course, that continues on since she's passed away. This painting was at the first museum exhibit that she had in Brooklyn. And then the painting ended up joining the collection of the Brooklyn Museum. So you can go see it in person if you're in New York. Black Pansy and Forget Me Nots from 1925. This one is in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Great shades of yellow here. And again, that close up detail and the simplified forms. How about
Yeah,
this
I just
quote?
want to draw away from the screen, and I'm trying to figure out why. Like antifreeze. There's an acidic sensibility to this one because of the green and yellow. I I am amazed that I noticed it, but I literally pulled myself back from the screen.
Well, and how about this quote from George O'Keeffe? Color is one of the great things in the world that makes life worth living to me. So you can really get a sense that she loves color. And it's interesting when you read letters that she wrote or quotes from her, just how often she talks about color, like over and over and over again. It kind of reminds me a lot of Vincent van Gogh. If you read his letters, he also talks a lot about color. It would have been fascinating if the two of them ever could have met and had a discussion on color.
She might have killed him.
Probably. But it would have been interesting nonetheless. Vincent meets Georgia. Hey,
It
how you doing?
yeah, both of them were trying to achieve a sort of truth that would not necessarily occur to a lot of other people.
I like yellow too.
Yes.
All right, so then she does this other series of artworks, which I'll call the Black Abstractions. And again, it's always cool to look at artwork and go to a museum and you see a painting. But if you were to see one of these on the wall, oh, that's unusual. But then when you see it kind of in the context of other ones that she did, you kind of see some things, patterns and trends and things like that. So Black Abstractions. So it wasn't all yellows and reds and purples for her. And this is interesting because it has a great contrast between the black with all the colors that we've seen previously. It's from 1926 at the
This one
Met in
almost
New York.
screams jazz.
What's that, Patty?
This one almost screams jazz. Not just this one,
Oh
the
yeah.
array. Oh, yeah. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
well, the
Okay.
date, don't you
Well, that's
think?
cool. Um,
Well, she
I'm not
talks
really
about.
an expert on jazz. I don't know.
Oh gosh, sometime you have to look at that Ken
Yeah, the
Burns
Ken
series.
Burns one.
Fabulous.
That's cool. And I mean, hey, we talked about George O'Keeffe and the music. So this is the Whitney Black and White from 1930.
And wouldn't
And
that have been the heyday of jazz moving into the cities during the migration?
oh yeah, and she's living in New York during this time, so I'm sure she was getting her fair share.
Harlem, yep.
So yeah, again, I just really think these are fascinating, particularly when you think of wow, we just ended up seeing all these paintings of all this rainbow of colors. And then at this point in time, she's doing these series of black and white paintings. And I'm only showing you a handful of these. She did several others from the same time frame that are a similar style. And so just imagine all these black and white abstractions. Any other thoughts on these, Patty, before we continue on?
Well, I'm looking at the nice juxtaposition of the curvilinear with the sharp white. And again, I look at that and I think trumpet. Yeah, it's like I mean, it's like there comes that trumpet making that point right there, and I just love the way she just surrenders herself to these images and colors. It would be hard to imagine anyone not liking color if they use all colors because most artists, again, if you think of Van Gogh, you think of that blue and that yellow.
Mm-hmm.
But Georgia O'Keeffe, you cannot restrict her to any given color, and that's across her career.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and like Renoir, we talked about him in the red hair models and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And Manet uses a lot of black. So let's see. Here's a famous one. It's the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. Black Iris, and she's capturing nature's abstract forms, where she's magnified this tiny flower and allows a viewer to see it up close in detail.
The irises are so fragile too. Yeah.
And there you go, the real thing on the right, and the George O'Keeffe representation on the left. I didn't put the full museum placard in the um, presentation, but the placard talks about the sensual curves and soft texture of this painting, and then again kind of enlarging it so that we can look at great detail. And it's really interesting colors. It's kind of the combination of the grays and the purples and the blacks and all that stuff. Black iris.
No,
And
so this one's her fave.
okay, that's cool. And black iris a little bit different of a flower just because it's darker than the average flower. I think myself, maybe a lot of other people, when you think of flowers, think of brighter colors oftentimes. Here we go back to the still life. The Philadelphia Museum of Art, Peach and Glass, 1927. Here's the Museum of Modern Art, Abstraction in Blue from 1927. And so one of the things about abstraction is, in my opinion, if you ask people, like, what kind of paintings does Georgia O'Keeffe make? Usually, in my opinion, the two things that people think of with her flowers and these New Mexico landscapes. But as you can see, she did a lot of abstractions, and that's one of the reasons why she's really considered one of the pioneers of modern art. And so here's a great example. This is not a flower per se, or it's not a Mexico landscape, but it is kind of a classic example of modern art, which is why it's in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art. And
One of the
again, oh, go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Patty. No,
One
you
of the
first.
sensations of this one is it's unique in that you almost feel like you're getting two completely different perspectives of the same whatever it is. Do
Yeah,
you
it's
see
kind
what
of
I'm
like it's kind of like a mirror image of
Yeah,
each other, the two halves. Yeah. Mhm.
it's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, and so this over on the right is kind of what I was talking about a minute ago. So again, when you think of Georgia Keefe, okay, she makes all these beautiful paintings of flowers, and she made all these spectacular paintings of the New Mexico landscape, which she did. But she definitely, you don't want to typecast her as just a painter of flowers and New Mexico landscapes. She did a lot of other things. We saw all the New York cityscapes that she did, and we've seen she's done some still lifes, and now she's you're doing all these abstractions, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't want to typecaster is just the painter of flowers in New Mexico landscapes, although those, of course, were amazing. And here's a quote from Georgia. I found that I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say in any other way, things that I had no words for. Calla lilies. When I think of calla lilies, I think of Diego Rivera. He made a lot of great calla lily paintings, but let's look at some by Georgia O'Keeffe. This
Completely different from hers.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. Um, gee, I should have held up one or two of his just as a like a compare and contrast, but we'll do that next time. But this is the Oklahoma City Museum of Art, Kelly number 2. Callaway's, if you didn't know, I actually researched this a little bit. They are really spectacular to see. They're imported; they're not native to the United States. They originated in South Africa, and as global trade took root, Callaway's ended up being shipped all over the world, and many artists have done paintings of them. Very distinctive in appearance. Here's another one at the Whitney from 1928. And let's look at some more flower paintings. Notice we were looking at some darker flowers a little bit earlier. Notice these ones are all very light colored. Now, most of these paintings are in chronological order, but I don't want you to think like, oh, okay, she made all these black and white abstractions and then she stopped. And then she made like light colored flowers and then she stopped. Some of these have like overlaps during the time frame, but I'm just kind of grouping them together just so you can get an idea of these different kind of like thematic subjects of her career. Here's the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. one of the things that's also fascinating, Georgia O'Keeffe talked about in her writings how a flower is very short-lived. That's one of the things that makes them precious to us is they don't last forever. But contrast that with a painting like Georgia O'Keeffe made, and they're eternal, at least as eternal as long as the painting is still with
We've had
us.
some great comments on that whole idea of the fragility. Somebody had mentioned that if you plant flowers on your own, it's almost each time you spend with it, it's like seeing a play again for the same play, but it's now very different. You have a different experience of it.
Oh, that's neat. Oh, I never thought about that, but that's really cool representation. And Philadelphia Museum of Art. These are cow lilies, but I thought I'd include them in this section. Yellow cactus at the Dallas Museum of Art. And the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, white iris.
That is so delicate.
Yeah, isn't it just really incredible? And here they are without the titles. You can see which one is your favorite.
I think she's getting added to my list. You know that question of who would you have, what people living or dead would you like to
Oh,
have dinner? This lady has a lot going on. Yeah.
oh yeah. I would have a lot of questions for her.
I would
I,
just like to sit and listen to her.
mm-hmm. Oh
Watch her.
yeah. Of this section, this one is my favorite, although I might be partial because I live in Texas, but I do really like
Yeah.
this painting. And as amazing as these. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Patty.
Oh, when you put it up, I thought, oh, that's very Texas.
Uh, well, the other thing too, I mean, as amazing as it is seeing these pictures on the screen of your computer or in a magazine, just to go see these in person. Like I've spent a lot of time looking at this painting in person, and just really amazing just to study it and look at it. And, people walk by, oh, I like that painting too, kind of thing.
This is almost like a fairy arbor. That
What?
really delicate one.
Oh yeah,
It's just gorgeous.
yeah.
Oh my Lord. I love this one.
Yeah, I do too. It's really, I mean, I would, sorry, I keep saying that over and over again, but I love this one too. Yeah, these Oriental poppies at the Wiseman Art Museum, which is not a real well-known place for people outside the state of Minnesota. But yeah, this is a really incredible painting. I can't describe it other way. Wow, and great contrast between the orange and the black.
The contrast is eye popping. Phyllis is saying, yeah, you can't take your eyes off it. Like this is
Yeah.
another one. We're in my house. I'd never be leaving.
Oh yeah, it's just so stunning. Which is funny because I mean I don't dislike orange, but it's not my favorite color. And but I love this painting, and I don't know what it is about the orange in this. I don't know if it's the contrast to the black or the different shading, but just really incredible. And how about this quote? What is my experience of the flower if not color?
And she magnifies that color so you just can't not know about it.
Well, what do you like about this one, Patty? Since I haven't done a good job being able to
Well,
articulate what it is that draws me to this one.
there's that sense of motion. There's that sense of falling into that black center and just being enveloped in this vibrancy of color that you can't not know about. If it's there, you know
Hmm.
about. And
Hmm.
the black centers kind of well, you know what I'm thinking about as I'm talking is Alice in Wonderland and falling down the rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
There's a sensation of that you're just like sucked into it and you can't move away. So brilliantly alive, Patricia's saying.
It
There's
was
a lot
funny.
of
Oh, go ahead,
heat
Patty.
there.
It's funny because one time you've probably seen these. They sell these boxes of note cards that have artwork on them. And one time when I was working at the Place to Arts, I bought one of those, and it was these George O'Keeffe flower paintings. And this particular note card, and I used them to give to people like for birthdays and Christmas or whatever. This particular note card, I never gave away. I just kept it because it was so
I
cool.
was just thinking that while you were saying, oh, I would never give that away.
Well, you read my mind. I never did.
Well, it's the same thing. You cannot pull yourself, you cannot part from this. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's amazing to me that she at any point stopped painting this. I would just keep going and going. You know?
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting comment from Sandy. She says, contrast life and death, maybe with the colors of the black. That's cool. I never thought about that, but yeah, you might be right. And then, all right, so this is not George O'Keeffe. This is some other guy, Monet or something like that. But anyway, no, just kidding. This is a famous painting by Monet at the Met. It's Chrysanthemums from 1882. And notice his depiction of some flowers. Now, Monet also had a really long career and did all different types of flower paintings. But let's kind of look at a painting by Monet and then a painting by Van Gogh. This is one of my favorites from him. This is at the Krieger Museum in Washington, D.C. This is some carnations, among other things. It's from 1886. So, okay, so you have Monet, and then you have Van Gogh, and these are both flower paintings. And then you have Georgia O'Keeffe. And, artists have been painting flowers since the beginning of time. And, not to say that they all look the same, but it was a very frequent genre of painting, say. And then Georgia O'Keeffe comes along and wow, look how different that is. And the Van Gogh painting is different than the Monet one, and the two of these are different than other ones. But that being said, just she has this very unique style, which is really incredible when you think of the sheer number of people that have painted flowers over the course of time.
The left and center, there's a sense of objectivity, which is not a negative thing, but the one on the right, there's a sense of participation.
Oh, I see. That's a cool way to put it. And I've said this before, but whenever I show these kind of side by side things, it's not to say that like one is better than the other. It's really just to show you like differences or comparison and contrast between them. And kind of same thing here. I love all three of these paintings, but they're all very, very different.
Yeah, and one when you say participation, there that implies one's own kinesis. There's movement happening in the self. Not that it isn't happening with the Monet or the Van Gogh. It's just that it's a more objective. Um, there's a disconnect between you and the painting, and I don't mean that in any negative way. It's just an objective perspective.
Yeah, and I guess another thing when consideration with these two, like this is how these floral paintings are usually done. They're flowers and they're in a vase and they're indoors, and you can see like the whole vase and all the flowers. And then wow, okay, look, this is something different. You don't see the vase and you don't see the whole flowers. It's this close up, and it's a very different approach that she came up with.
Yes, one of our viewers just made the point that the Monet and the Van Gogh remind her of the 16-year-old George O'Keeffe still life with the teapot and the yellow flowers.
Oh,
That would
that is
the style of the time.
that is a great point. Actually, let me go back to that. I really like that point. Thank you for mentioning that. Let's actually go back to that. Sorry, it'll take just a moment. Hold on.
That was Nancy, I think, that said that.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Appreciate that. Okay, so yeah, here we go. That's a very, again, kind of very traditional style. And, I like this painting a lot. I mean, it's cool and definitely way better than anything I'd ever be able to do. But hold the thought for this one, and then we'll fast forward to the one that we're looking at. And voila, here it is.
Yeah.
And,
Now,
God, oh, go ahead, Patty.
oh no, if you group the teapot one with the Monet and the Van Gogh and ask people to pick out which is the O'Keeffe, I'm not sure a lot of people would immediately know.
Yeah, that is a excellent point because I would agree with that. Some people might not be so sure about that one. And God, this painting is so amazing. I'm almost tempted just to stop the program right now. Just let's look at this for the rest of the night. But that being said, we'll continue on because who knows? Maybe there's some like, oh, I hate that.
Oh,
All right, well, let's look at some leaves, which not exactly flowers per se, but kind of a similar, natural element type of thing. And here are three great examples of her work in this area. This is at a private collection pattern of leaves. And look, one of the leaves is ripped. How did that happen? And you can kind of see some comparison and contrast between the leaves and the flowers. Art Institute Chicago, Yellow Hickory Leaves with Daisy, 1928.
Christina is making the point that yellow is a hard color to blend.
That is a good point. Thank you. Appreciate that. In the 1920s, George O'Keeffe began concentrating on representing enlarged still life elements. Although known more for her flower painting, she frequently depicted leaves, inspired by the examples she found on her walks around Lake George in upstate New York, where she summered with her husband Alfred Stieglitz between 1918 and 1928. In Yellow Hickory Leaves with Daisy, O'Keeffe painted the leaves around the small white daisy at lower center so that they seemed to be emanting from the flower. That
It's
is very
amazing
cool.
how similar this is to my ironing fallen leaves with between two sheets of wax paper. I think that was fourth grade.
Oh yeah, yeah. Common
A little
common
bit
educational exercise back then.
different. I'm kind of old, Robert.
Well, no, I we did that too. In fact, my mom probably still has them in her attic.
Oh, Lordy.
Here you go, two yellow leaves at the Brooklyn Museum of Art.
That is a great point, though. You can, if you look at the yellows, and then in this one, she's even got the green there. It would be hard to blend those, and yet she's very good at it.
Yeah, that is a great point. I mean, I have to admit, I'm not an artist. I just like art, but I would imagine that yellow has to be, if not the one of the hardest colors to paint, just because the I don't know the composition of it, so to speak. So yeah, great point there. Thank you very much.
Look at how many fights Van Gogh had with yellow.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there you go, leaves.
She had an advantage. She could probably afford more expensive paints than he could.
Yeah, she did have that advantage. All right, here's another one at the Dallas Museum of Art. Gray, blue, and black. Pink circle from 1929. And this is actually a painting of a flower, but because it's such a close-up magnification, it does look like an abstract painting. Like if you didn't know the title of this, or if you weren't familiar with George O'Keeffe's artwork, you might not initially know what exactly this is a painting of.
And there's definitely a sense of whirlpool to it, so it gets
Yeah.
drawn in.
George O'Keeffe's early abstractions, though not as well known as her later Southwestern paintings, played a pivotal role in the development of American modernism. Again, just because there's not a lot of, as Patty mentioned before, this is before Andy Warhol and Jackson Pollock and all these other great American modern artists. Gray, blue, and black pink circle is the culmination of O'Keeffe's series, a body of abstract drawings and paintings that she made during the 1920s. Oops, jumped too fast. All right, so this is a series. Um, Up until now, I've been kind of showing you examples of different series that George O'Keeffe did, but they've usually just been like one of the paintings, just in the sake of time. But this particular one, I want to show the full series because they're all together at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. This is the Jack and Pulpit series. And so imagine going to the museum and seeing all five of these paintings side by side, which is what you can do when you go to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., where I used to live. Well, I didn't live at the National Gallery of Art, but I lived in Washington, D.C. And here's the flower itself. Very distinctive form in nature.
I think it's a form of orchid, and I believe it's native to North America. When I was young, this was considered an endangered species.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
as were lady slippers.
And so here's George O'Keeffe's paintings of the flower. Now, I kind of was disappointed because I couldn't find a picture that had all five of the paintings on the wall. But how the museum is configured is there's another one. The fifth painting is on the left. This is kind of like an L-shaped section of the gallery. But it is really amazing just to be able to stand here and look at five George O'Keeffe paintings of the same subject done in different kind of versions, all side by side. It's funny because this picture, this I took this actually picture myself, and it was funny because I used to get when I lived in Washington D.C. I used to give tours of different things, including the art museum, and I distinctly remember this photo because I took this picture, and then like a few hours, or like maybe like an hour later, a friend of mine who came on the tour, we were standing outside the museum. Wow, what do you think is going to happen with this COVID thing that's like starting to be in the news? I don't know.
Oh,
That was the last tour I ever gave the museum because everything like shut down 3 or 4 days later. So kind of a funny, a sentimental photo. But anyway, it's really amazing to go here and see these paintings in person. Jack and Pulpit #2, the magnified flowers. This is a series, and kind of the similarities and the differences between these five paintings. So,
Carolyn's correcting me. She says it's from the arum family and not related to orchids. But so
oh, I see. Well, thank
I'm
you.
not certain, but thank you, Carolyn.
That's what's cool about these programs. A lot of smart people on these ones. So thank you.
Exactly.
And so, why does Georgia paint flowers like this? Well, here's a quote. So I said to myself, I'll paint what I see, what the flower is to me, but I'll paint it big, and they will be surprised into taking the time to look at it. I will make even busy New Yorkers take time to see what I see of flowers. And so she had a lot of quotes kind of on this similar theme. And she's talking about how, people are really busy and they don't really stop to take time to look at a flower for very long, even though they're beautiful. But yet she's going to make these big paintings and it will really kind of grab people's attention and get them to stop and look at them. So really cool that she did that. And so that's one of the reasons why she made these big magnified enlarged flowers because she wanted you to stop and take a look at them as opposed to maybe more of a traditional still life of flowers.
This is Christina's favorite, by the way.
Which one? This one?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, you have good taste, then it's a really cool one. To go back to your point, Patty, it would be really fascinating to just sit and listen to her talk about these or actually watch her make one or two of these.
It's definitely not a shrinking violet, and I don't mean any pun by that, but as for her era, and again, she had some advantages that other artists might not have, but she definitely was not a shrinking violet.
Mm-hmm.
That is extraordinary right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even think that this is a flower if you didn't know. Like, maybe if you were familiar with George O'Keeffe and you saw this, like, oh, and you know about it, like, oh, okay, well, she does these magnifications, so that's a flower. But if you just some random person walked in the museum, like, what do you think this is a painting of? I don't know, the moon or a building or who knows, a street
There's
light.
something there's something otherworldly about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just very unusual. And again, here's the flowers in nature, and then here they are with her painting. All right, let's continue on. Here's another side-by-side comparison for you. Great contrast of blue and black. This one is at the Met. And so in 1929, George O'Keeffe ends up going to New Mexico for the first time. And she just immediately fell in love with it and makes all these paintings. including many of the flowers there. We have a program. The next Georgia O'Keeffe program we do is going to be on New Mexico paintings, but it's going to be more focused on like the landscapes and things. But I thought I would include the flower ones that she did there in this particular program.
There have been several precursors that make me think immediately of the Jimson weed she did for, who was that, Helena Rubinstein?
Oh, yeah. Hold that thought. That's coming up in just a little bit.
But do you see it where that do you see like the precursor or the hint of how the Jimson weed? I'm
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
wondering how the commission came from seeing some of these hints.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good question because I mean, again, she was well known during this time. It wasn't like she was an unknown artist. And hey, can you make something that looks like that? And then here's another quote, kind of what we were talking about before. Nobody sees a flower, really. It is so small, it takes time. We haven't time, and to see takes time. That's really kind of a great quote, not just for this painting, but just art in general and life on a grander scale. Everyone is so busy. We don't take time to, what's that saying? Take time to stop and smell the roses.
Roses. Yeah,
You have
no
to
pun
take time to,
intended.
yeah, you have to take time to stop and look at the flowers.
That relates to that idea of a play, though, too. You can see a play half a dozen times and find different things in it.
Yeah. Or, same thing like we are talking about music. Listen to a song. I mean, if you have a favorite song, you would listen to it
Exactly.
over and over again. All right. Here you go. We were just talking about this. So, yeah, look at these paintings. Whoops. Sorry. Look at these two. And then how about these two?
Yeah, and the
Jimson
earlier
Weed.
one as well.
So, this is at the Crystal Bridges Museum in Arkansas, which was started by the Walmart family. Jimson Weed White Flower #1. And this painting was purchased by Alice Walton for the Crystal Bridges Museum collection. And the purchase price was $44.4 million. And that was even 11 years ago. I mean, imagine with inflation what $44.4 million would be today. But that was a record price paid for a Georgia O'Keeffe painting. And this was from her New Mexico home. She had these.
I'll take two.
What's that, Patty?
I said at that price, I'll take two.
Yeah, right. He said, well, there are two kind of a similar paintings that she did. So yeah. And then here you go. George O'Keeffe flower painting sells for record breaking $44.4 million. I like that her paintings are they're all very similar, but that they're all very different. They're all unique. I'm going to play a short video from our friends at Sotheby's, but because of copyrights, I'm going to pause our recording because I don't want to record the video I'm about to play. So hold on for 1 second. All right, let's continue on. There's the full view. And then here's a similar painting. This is at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, which also has a great collection. Jimson Weed from 1936. So this is the largest flower painting that George O'Keeffe made. Her paintings overall are usually pretty good size. I mean, they're not usually massive. But this particular one is extremely large. It's 71 inches by 84 inches. And this is what Patty was referring to earlier. This was a commission that she received from Elizabeth Arden. Elizabeth Arden was opening up a salon in New York, and she liked George O'Keeffe's artwork, and she asked if she could make a painting specifically for the salon. And the commission was worth $10,000 way back in 1936, which would be $219,000 in today's money. So again, George O'Keeffe, a successful artist during her lifetime. Here's the painting, and then I'll show you a picture of it hanging in the museum because it's so large. But we'll see that in just a moment. But again, this kind of idea of taking I hate to call a flower ordinary just because they are so beautiful. But that being said, you see flowers frequently in nature and in different places, and she's transforming the ordinary of the everyday flower into something extraordinary, like these paintings. And wow, okay, here it is on the wall. I was kind of disappointed because I couldn't find a picture of a person standing next to the painting to give you that context. But I mean, this is a museum wall, and you can see some people back here, but this is a giant painting. It's 7 feet wide. So yeah, imagine having this in your salon or in your home or in your museum. And again,
You know,
great colors and shapes. What's that, Patty?
no, you know, it never occurred to me before, but it's a common theme in mythology. I had the wrong makeup maven. I said Rubinstein, it's Arden, but there is that sort of suggestion of poison and beauty, you know, together.
Oh yeah.
And Jimson weed is a somewhat toxic plant or hallucinogenic plant. But if you think of, I can't think of one of the specific myths right off, but there is always that mystery of lethality to the pursuit of beauty.
Oh yeah. Well, that pursuit of like a lot of things in the Greek Roman mythology.
Well, I'm just thinking though, Elizabeth Arden commissioning a Jimson weed painting, whether she was conscious of that when she did.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. Good question. So yeah, Indianapolis Museum of Art. Next time you're in the Hoosier State, go check that out. They have a great art collection.
I'm glad you
And
mentioned somebody was asking. Yes.
and again, so the one on the right is at the museum in Indiana, and the one on the left is in Arkansas. All right, sunflowers, very
Mm.
popular flower. George O'Keeffe made several sunflower paintings. These are just two of the many examples. Sunflower, New Mexico, #1 from 1935, Cleveland Museum of Art. And this one is in a private collection. It's called A Sunflower for Maggie. And Maggie was George's friend Margaret Johnson, as in the Johnson and Johnson family.
Uh-huh.
And Margaret Johnson became friends with George O'Keeffe and gave her a sunflower one day as a gift, and she decided to make a painting of it. All right, Patty's favorite color, red.
Just wins again.
This is at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art in Fort Worth again. So this particular painting is 10 years earlier than the next one we're going to see. I'm just grouping them together because they're both great examples of the bold and vivid color that is red. By magnifying her botanical subjects, O'Keeffe transformed the traditional genre of still life painting into something entirely fresh. Her studies of plant life celebrate the dynamic colors and patterns found in nature and also commemorate her association with people and places. She related the subject of red cannas with her husband, the photographer Alfred Stieglitz. The flowers blossomed in their garden at Lake George, a resort town in New York's Adirondack Mountains, where the Stieglitz family owned a summer house. And then here's one in Chicago. This one is 10 years later. So the previous painting was in 1927. This one's 1937. And just two fabulous examples of the color red. Patty,
And that's
as a lover of the color red, any other thoughts on these two?
that's one of my favorite combinations is that you know any shade of red with the right shade of yellow.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's cool.
Well, if you're looking to pop out in a crowd, you know.
Oh yeah, they say if you're driving a red sports car, you're speeding, you're asking for trouble because you're going to stand out. And then we saw this painting when we were doing the New York program. It's called Pink Dish and Green Leaves from 1929. And the reason why I'm showing it here is because, well, here's the full view first. And if you look at the pink dish, you'll notice it makes an appearance in this painting, although from a different perspective. So, okay, here's the pink dish from the side view. And then here's the pink dish, but from up above with some geranium leaves. And it's a great combination of the natural form is in the geranium leaves and the man-made form in the pink dish, and then also the difference between the shapes of the dish and the leaves.
And the Art Deco too.
Yeah, yeah, great point. Thanks, Patty. I forgot to mention that, but yeah, like you really get a sense of the Art Deco in this particular one.
And it's almost like if you look at the original the painting, the New York painting, it's almost like she was going. By the way, coming attractions of where she was going to be going in that you know Art Deco vase that comes out of nowhere in shouldery New York.
Oh yeah, because I would think a lot of people, and maybe if you're really familiar with George O'Keeffe, you might be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I can see where this is a George O'Keeffe painting." But I would think for a lot of people that maybe had never seen this before, they might not immediately recognize this as a George O'Keeffe. But that's a great point about, yeah, okay, here it is, but coming soon. Here's another one for you. I should have put the one on the left. I should have put the one on the right on the left because that one actually came first, but you get the idea.
Christina, I think that isn't the New York one already on video, the YouTube?
Yes, uh-huh. Yeah. I
Somebody just
posted the I posted the link for it in the chat if anyone's,
okay.
and it should also be with the Zoom link that I sent out earlier. All right, let's talk about some later flowers. Later meaning like later in her career. Museum of Modern Art, an orchid from 1941. Poppies at the Milwaukee Art Museum. I like this painting a lot.
Mm.
I mean, I like all of them, but some of them just really incredible. I'll put this into Patty's category. If I had this in my house, it'd be hard to leave home. When you take a flower in your hand and really look at it, it's your world from the moment. I want to give that world to someone else. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you're watching this live, the video that we recorded, those were George O'Keeffe's words, but that was a actress that were reading them, so that wasn't George O'Keeffe's actual voice. Forgot to mention that earlier. And this is at the McNay Art Museum, museum that I really like in San Antonio, Texas. So the next time you're in San Antonio, don't just go to the Alamo or the Riverwalk. Go over to the McNay and see this beautiful Georgia O'Keeffe painting. For some reason, this one reminds me of grapefruits,
Yes.
although it's not a grapefruit, it's pink and yellow hollyhocks. And again, this idea of, okay, usually a flower is something really small and you put it in your hands. And then this is an example. Okay, here's one of the paintings. And you can see these two gentlemen are holding it. And you can see the size of it. So very different. This flower that normally fit in the palm of their hands, has been enlarged. So we can kind of look at it. So thanks, Georgia. Appreciate that.
You wouldn't call her flowers posies.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're flowers.
But if you look at this one, just look at all the incredible detail here, and then we've talked about the colors and the shapes and the forms and the lines.
And the fragility is painted right in there. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say, but it's there.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I know what you mean, and that's again, I'm not an artist, just an admirer of art, but that can't be an easy thing to do because you really don't see that frequently in artwork.
Not at that scale. And that looks very fragile to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, there you go. Some later flowers. Now, remember at the start of our program, we were talking about these early abstractions that George O'Keeffe did, which these were really unusual for the time. There weren't other artists that were making things like this. But Georgia O'Keeffe makes abstractions throughout most of her career. So, okay, so these are some early ones. And then how about these later ones? And yeah, again, you can see some similarities, but you can also see a lot of differences. So again, here's the earlier ones. I'll hold it up for a second, just to kind of refresh your memory. And here's the later ones we'll look at. This is Blue A from 1959. And look at, so George O'Keeffe, born in 1887, 1959, 72 years old and still making great artwork.
And she wasn't sitting down to paint these. They're too big.
Yeah, only one.
Do you have any idea what that's in reference to? Only one?
No, unfortunately, I don't on this particular one.
Interesting.
It's the only one I don't know the title. No, I'm just kidding. It was Yellow and Pink, number 3. A lot of these landscapes, or I should, sorry, a lot of these abstractions, she got inspired by landscapes. Um, Whereas some of the earlier ones, it could have been landscapes or flowers or this or that. Um, the later ones tend to be more kind of inspired, like these large scale outdoor places,
Yeah,
oftentimes.
Christina was pointing out the first one had a massive amount of movement in it. I
This
would
one,
agree. No, the first one.
oh, I
In
get,
the yeah, that one just moves. It really does.
yeah, really incredible. So let me go back because I wanted to show you the beginning one. Oops. All right, so here's the early ones. What do you think, Patty? Early ones versus the later ones. What do you think?
Um, I think overall the slide I like the earlier ones, but I do love the upper right hand one on the later one too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these just are so adventurous.
Mm-hmm.
These
Very
by this
fluid.
time there, you're like, oh yeah, I can recognize where she's coming from. It's just it doesn't grab you in the same way because the earlier ones would be kind of abrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would have been expecting them.
Yeah, and these are very kind of fluid, and it looks like the scale is like she. It looks like she's trying to show you something that's like bigger. Not that these are small, um, but these look like a little bit more like close up, and these seem to me like more kind of far away.
These seem more related to the landscapes too, which would
Mm-hmm.
it would they would have come after she had already developed that period too.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's continue on. All right, so this is not a photograph of George O'Keeffe, but this time frame was the beginning of the jet age, and travel becomes more frequent and commonplace. And did you know that George O'Keeffe loved to travel? She visited many, many different places throughout the world, and she actually even got inspired to make paintings as she was on airplanes, looking out the window because you know you're high up above and you're looking down, and so she did a whole series of paintings essentially from an airplane window. Now, she wasn't making the paintings while she's flying the airplane, but she kind of got inspired by the flight and the travel. And so this is Above the Clouds one from 1962 or 1963. And these series of paintings from airplane views, and George O'Keeffe, very well traveled. And then here's another one. This is the Art Institute Chicago, Sky Above the Clouds, #4 from 1965. This is the biggest painting she made in her career. It's 8 feet high and it's 24 feet long or wide. Wow. It took her a long time to work on this. And again, inspired by her airplane travel. And when she made this, she was 77 years old. Wow.
Amazing.
She could have just been sitting at home all day watching cartoons and taking naps and stuff, but no, she's making incredible art. I painted a painting 8 feet high and 24 feet wide. It kept me working every minute from 6 a.m. till 8 or 9 at night, as I had to be finished before it was cold. I worked in the garage and it had no heat, meaning the garage of her home in New Mexico. Such a size is, of course, ridiculous, but I had it in my head as something I wanted to do for a couple of years. And if you want to see this painting in person, it's at the Art Institute Chicago. George O'Keeffe has a long connection with the Art Institute Chicago. She actually studied there as a student in her earlier days and lived in Chicago and worked for a period of time as a commercial artist, among other things. And you can see a picture of her in the bottom when the painting was being installed at the museum. George O'Keeffe frequently visited the Art Institute Chicago, and she donated a number of her artworks to the museum, including this one. So
And
yeah,
that went on a ladder to be painting this.
yeah, exactly. Especially when you're that age.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
And
Uh,
then it's really neat because when you go to the museum, you come out of the American Art Gallery. If you're coming from up above and like, boom, this painting is staring you right in the face, or if you're downstairs and you're going up to the American Art Gallery, it's right here. And you frequently see people stopping to, you know, look at it or selfies or whatever. And so just sometimes the museum will have like different things going on here. But yeah, I mean, look at the scale of the painting next to this dancer. So really, not only is it a great painting, but the way the museum is it on display is also really spectacular.
I bet you there's not a lot of proposal pictures though with this one.
I don't know. That's a good point. I'm gonna have to look into that, Betty. Maybe I'm not sure. Hey, let's get married and come fly away with me. Queued up the Frank Sinatra "Come Fly Away with Me" song.
Yeah, that is incredible though.
Oh yeah. So next time you're in Chicago, go check that out. See, we're in the home stretch for a program. Got a few more paintings to go. How about this one? She painted this when she was 85 years old, for God's sake. Another still life. And she was really into found objects, meaning like objects that she found as she was out on her walks and traveling about. So black rock with blue sky and white clouds. And you can see the rock here is on this pedestal, which looks like it's a marble column. And it's really interesting differences between the rock and the column and the sky with the clouds in the background. And all right, another one from the age 85 era. This is one of the last paintings she did. So Georgia O'Keeffe did this painting in 1972. It's one of her last paintings. You can see she lived to 1986. In her later years, she essentially had to give up painting because she was having too many health issues with her eyes and her arthritis and things like that. Just overall um, health issues. When God, 85 years old. A lot of people don't even live that long, unfortunately. But she is alive and she's still making artwork. But she did it for quite a few years after this painting. But right around this time, she pretty much had to give up making artwork, unfortunately. But this one is called The Beyond, which I think is fascinating. And I don't like to read too much into artwork because you can kind of get carried away. But hey, the title of this and the subject is she kind of maybe realizing that, gee, I have lived a long life. I'm not going to be around forever. Um, and is there any kind of connection between the two? I don't know. To look at it and decide for yourself.
There's definitely a sense of transition in it.
Oh, yeah. Because, in the words of my favorite art history professor at the University of Michigan, Dr. Rick Axum, when you look at art, you can see whatever you want to
Mm.
see. And true for this one as well.
Yeah, as Elizabeth is saying, it looks like a horizon. That's as somebody who's a coastal dweller, that reminds me of ocean sky, ocean horizon sky.
Yeah, that is a great comment. Thank you. Appreciate that. I would agree. That's what I think of when I look at this one.
Because there's even, believe it or not, there's a difference between the two blues. The way she puts them on the canvas, they're just two different things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Very different. So, all right. We've been learning about George O'Keeffe. She was born way back in 1887 and she passed away in 1986. A very long life and long career. Um, this was feedback from our audience saying, "Hey, can you kind of summarize some of these programs and like a few talking points? Like, what are the key things?" So, all right, so Georgia O'Keeffe, American modernism pioneer. We talked a lot about that, the influence she had on modern art. It's really part of the avant-garde, meaning she wasn't just doing traditional things; she was bringing about change. She trained entirely in the United States. You didn't hear anything about her, studying in Paris. The subjects, the flowers and abstractions are the most um, uh, common things that we talked about today. But she also did these New York cityscapes and then New Mexico landscapes we'll talk about next time, but not sexuality, or I should say sensuality. The style, these very bold colors. There was a lot of different colors. We saw the magnified shapes and the simplified details. And then we saw the juxtaposition of the different objects in their artwork. She's married a photographer and modern art promoter, Alfred Stieglitz, and one of the world's great artists, not just a great woman artist or a great American artist, just one of the world's great artists, period. And then this is
To
the
answer your
second.
question, she
Oh,
did
what's
not
that?
have children, right? One of
What's that?
our
Oh, yeah.
viewers asked if she had children. She did not, right?
Yeah, she did not have children, which, interestingly enough, if you think of a lot of the great women artists did not have children. Frida Kahlo did not have children, at least not any that lived. Um, and then Mary Cassatt, she didn't have children. Margaret Bork White didn't have, so these women kind of giving up the whole children thing to focus on their careers. Interestingly enough, but a lot of, but
But they were all
Van,
still creating. They were creating, just not creating what women are expected to create.
yeah, well, especially in that era. But a lot of famous male artists didn't have children. Even Van Gogh didn't have children. So, all right. So been a second part of a four-part series. The first part was on the early New York years. That was part one. If you missed it, you can watch it on our YouTube channel. This one is part two. It's on flowers and abstractions. This program is being recorded. I'll post the recording on our YouTube channel, and I'll send out the link. But it's going to take me at least a couple of days to do that. So bear with me for that. Our YouTube channel is called Washington, D.C. History and Culture, and we have a sister channel called Texas History and Culture. If you're wondering why we have two, because I used to live in Washington, D.C., but now I live in Texas. That's why that. And then part three, which I don't have the date for this, but it'll be coming up pretty soon because I'm almost finished with this one. It's going to be called George O'Keeffe, the New Mexico years. And we're going to be looking at all these really cool, fabulous, and amazing paintings that George O'Keeffe did while she was living in New Mexico, the place she's most closely associated with. And I have to tell you, as a sneak preview, I've never lived there, but I visited many times, and New Mexico is one of my favorite states. It's one of the most beautiful states in America. And then part four, which will be later on down the road, will be George O'Keeffe, a online tour of her home and studio. And wow, look at this view out her bedroom window. How would you like to wake up or go to sleep at night with that view? And then look at her house. I always find it fascinating. Artists, they create all these amazing, incredible artworks. What do their homes look like? Whether it's Frida Kahlo or Claude Monet, and we've done programs on the two of them in their homes. But this time we'll be visiting George O'Keeffe's home, but I don't have a date for that yet because still working on this particular one. And then
See, no
just
program on Van Gogh's home, huh?
what's that?
I said no program on Van Gogh's
Oh,
home.
well, yeah, that's because he like lived in so many different places, and the home that was most famous, the Yellow House, blew up during World War II, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, but that would be neat to see CCAS stuff. And just FYI, we have some other art programs coming up if you're watching us live. Um, we won't do this forever, but for the time being, the art programs all use the same Zoom link. So just hold on to that. You can join us then. But our next art program is next Saturday, 8 days from tonight. It's going to be called Claude Monet and Impressionism at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And then in early July, mid-July, we'll be talking about George Caleb Bingham and the American experience. And then in later July, we'll be talking about the American collection at my former employer, the Detroit Institute of Arts, which has this incredible collection of American art, including this great painting by John Singer Sargent. So let's see, I'll play a couple short videos in just a moment before we do that. Patty, any final thoughts on Georgia O'Keeffe?
Now, people are really thanking you vociferously for this program. Somebody said that
Thank you.
they felt like they knew a lot about Georgia O'Keeffe, but were fascinated by the insights that came up here.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I couldn't do this without Patty's amazing help. And of course, we have our great audience. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. What about Georgia O'Keeffe's artwork? Any final thoughts before we cue up the
Oh,
final two short videos?
I'll never not be in love with her artwork. I mean, it's just hypnotic. You can't resist it.
Yeah, it's
I
just
never
so
met somebody that said they hated her work.
you have to find one.
Yeah. I wonder if there are people that because she has such a broad range, how can you say I hate Georgia O'Keeffe? I mean, like Frida Kahlo, you would say, well, there's a consistency to her work, and of course, she didn't live anywhere near as many years, and she had a lot of health issues. But the, I don't know how you could resist this lady
You know,
and
it's
her
funny
work.
you say that because I don't know what made me think of this, but a long time ago, I worked for this guy. And when I first met him, one of the first things he said to me was, we were talking about traveling to different places, and Paris came up. And he's like, "Oh, I hate Paris." And, I've heard people say like they dislike Paris or it's not their favorite place, but just the fact that he said, "quote I hate Paris," and like the anger in his voice, I just thought was really
Ooh.
unusual. Well, come to find out, that guy was like one of the biggest jerks I've ever met in my life.
Well, that's
The
not
whole "I
surprising.
hate Paris" thing was like a real. It should have been like a warning sign. So when you said like, "Oh, I don't know how anyone could like hate George O'Keeffe," like, yeah, I would. You wouldn't think so, but then again, maybe I should go ask that guy that I used to work for.
See, that's one of the great things about getting older. You can tell right away which people are worth spending any time with.
Exactly. After he said that, I should have been on Indeed and LinkedIn later that night, but I'm dumb enough to stay there and deal with it for a year, deal with the negativities and sarcasm for a year
Yeah.
before I bailed out.
Yeah, I've actually had people say to me, "God, you're so strange. If you don't like something, you just forget about it." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah."
Well, yeah, there's so many other nice things to watch. So again, I'll post the video. It'll take a little bit. I thought, why don't I do this? We'll close out our program, but before we do, I'll queue up previews of our next two programs. So a short preview of the Claude Monet and Impressionism program, which we'll be doing next Saturday evening. It'll use the same Zoom link, and then a quick preview of our George Caleb Bingham, a great American artist that some people might not be familiar with. So if you're watching us live, stay tuned. We'll end the commentary now. And Patty, thank you so much once again for joining us. Greatly appreciate all the time you give to us and enriching people's interest in art history. Thank you. So thanks everyone.
Oh, I really enjoy the company, and the commentary is fabulous too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've learned so we've talked about this before, Patty and I, but we both learn, and Brad too when he can join us, and even Harry, we all learn so much from your great comments and interesting insights. So appreciate all the comments from the audience. Let me